Cool. I'll go ahead and kick them off.
Okay, and welcome back, you guys, to the RPGchick-a-thon with A Legend of Zelda Link to the Past NMG race between Elmagus, Greffery, and ErirorPS. And they are not allowed to pick up the Sanctuary Heart in this race, so that should be fun. But I'm going to pass this over to your commentators for this race, Emma, and are you Jam Beaver?
You can call me Greenham. How about that?
Greenham, okay, Greenham. So here are your commentators.
He's posing as a Frenchman. He's not really a Frenchman.
How do you know?
I just have a feeling.
That accent wasn't convincing at all?
Not at all, actually. It's pretty bad. I mean, it was fine. Alright, yeah, so like High Spirits has said, we've got Link to the Past here. No major glitches is the category. Basically that means that they can't do anything like out of bounds or exploration glitch or anything like that. I don't know a whole lot about all the glitches. That's why I have Greenham here, because he knows more about the technical stuff than I do. But this is the basic category that most people run in at this game, for those who don't know.
Yeah, this is definitely the most popular category of this speedrun. It's kind of the more straightforward category. We try to maintain as much of the natural playthrough of the game as possible, so therefore no save and quit is allowed, so you're going to see a lot of overworld traversal as a result of that. The escape here, starting out, our aim here is to rescue Zelda, who has been kidnapped. Not a whole lot going on here because we don't have very many items. Obviously, we don't have the boots yet, which allow us to dash, so Link can only just walk around from room to room. So the way to go as fast as possible through here is to make sure your movement is just very clean. You're not nudging any doorways. You're dealing with the enemy RNG appropriately. And there's one kind of very small movement optimization you can do called pumping, which basically just gives Link a little bit faster movement speed by mashing some directions against a wall. Really only saves about 10 seconds across the entire run, so not a huge deal, but if you see Link kind of like wiggling from side to side occasionally, he's not just doing a happy jig, he's trying to go fast.
Yeah, and there's plenty of spots around the run where pumping is very useful. There's a couple rooms in Escape near the end. They're water rooms, and Link actually moves faster in the water when you're pumping versus just regular walking. Well, I guess you would anywhere, but it actually really makes a difference in water. And also on stairs and ladders, you'll see them doing more pumping. And yeah, like Greenham said, against walls and in the air and things like that.
Oh, Elmagus actually just taught me something that I didn't know about this game. I played this game for several years now, and I don't think I ever knew that there was a heart underneath that pot right there. Usually
Really?
You don't need to pick that one up, but giving us a little DLC content here, very nice. Did I just say DLC content like ATM? Very nice.
Yeah, downloadable content.
Off to a good start.
Yeah, ATM machine. Alright, so we're going to be coming up now on the first boss of the game, the Ball and Chain Guard. He either requires 2 pots to be thrown at him, or 1 pot and 4 slashes, or just 8 slashes. We see Greffery doing the 1 pot and 4 slash, Eriror did the 8 slash, and looks like Elmagus is also doing 8 slash. All those 3 methods are there's not really a huge difference between them as far as time goes. 8 slash is the fastest as long as you don't tank on the Ball and Chain Guard or get hit or anything like that. So that's usually when you see from a lot of people, but the 1 pot 4 slash is just marginally slower, so it's still a good strategy.
Yeah, for sure. Like you said, not too much of a time difference between all those strats, so usually it's just going to be based on whatever the runner is most comfortable with and whatever they feel is within their skill level, and you're going to see a lot of instances of that throughout this run. We'll try to highlight them wherever appropriate.
Yeah, unfortunately this part of the game is not very exciting. They're just basically walking through, trying to get to the end. to save Zelda. So yeah, but this should be an exciting race anyway. We got all three of these guys have very similar or close PBs, I should say. I think Eriror's got a 126, Gref with a 127, and Elmagus with a 128. So they're all within a couple minutes of each other. And when I say 126, 127, I mean 1 hour, 26 minutes.
I mean, should they be done already?
Yeah.
But yeah, they are all very close in PBs, and that really only gives us a slight indication of what's going to happen in this race. Anything can happen. There's tons of RNG littered throughout this run in terms of enemy patterns, and then also just uncontrollable RNG that you can't really do anything about. So really anything can happen, and it'll be very exciting to see where these guys end up after Light World in relation to each other, because Dark World is where the run really starts to kick off.
Yeah, these three will probably be pretty close to each other for the entirety of Light World, and then Dark World is where you may see them kind of disperse a little bit more. So yeah, but one thing to note here is that these guys, since they aren't grabbing the Sanctuary Heart, which is a heart container that you get, which gives you, 4 hearts and a free refill after this escape portion, they're not going to be grabbing that, so they need to actually manage their health through this segment. Because once they leave the sanctuary, they've got to go through an overworld that's full of enemies, and the last thing they want to do is down the overworld and, have to restart.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Usually when you pick up the sand cart, you get that full refill, so you're relatively safe on your walk over to Eastern Palace. But if you die there, you're gonna have to start from Link's house, and that's gonna lose you a bit of time. So. All right, let's make sure we don't get any invalid runs here from people grabbing the sand cart and doing it out of habit.
Yeah. Usually people who skip the Sanctuary Heart are like, in the 1 hour 23 minute, 1 hour 24 minute range. Like that's more like world record range. So, or like top 10 even. So yeah, grabbing the Sanctuary Heart is something that like the majority of runners do, and something that these guys probably haven't tried is dropping Sand Cart before. So it definitely would be very, much of a habit for them to just grab it. But thankfully, none of them did.
Yeah, it's something that if you are unpracticed with it and you get into a boss fight and you don't realize you have 1 less heart than normal, it could take you by surprise. So luckily, if you are using the practice hack for this game, which is a fantastic resource if you are interested in learning the speedrun for this game or just playing around with it at all. But through all those practice states, you actually do not have the Sanctuary Heart. So if you just load up any of those presets, you're going to be practicing without it anyway. So looks like everyone's doing pretty well. As soon as I say that, of course, Eriror takes a Octo Rock to the back, and he is down to 1 heart right now. Should be relatively safe and able to get inside of Eastern, though, because death at this point would send him all the way back to Link's house, which would be rather unfortunate. But once he gets inside Eastern, there will be some hearts underneath pots that he can grab and hopefully get himself up to full health, because there is a strat within this dungeon where we have to intentionally take some damage to get the big key in a slightly unintended way.
Yeah, so we'll hopefully see them grabbing these hearts here. Yep, that's the first heart pot, I guess. This next room that they're coming up on is what we call the Stalfos room, because we're very creative people in the Link to the Past community. But essentially what they're doing is throwing 2 pots and killing the Stalfos before they even spawn. If you move a certain way in that room, it actually messes with the collision detection, and there's supposed to be 4 Stalfos that spawn there, but only 2 spawn if you move in a certain way. So, and you can kill them before they even appear.
Yeah, and something kind of funny that happened there. Eri threw the boomerang at that heart that was underneath the pot to try and grab it, and he was denied by a rupee that unfortunately dropped right in the way. Elmagus had a little bit better luck. He was able to get both the heart and the rupee with his boom throw, so definitely making up some time there.
The value. Alright, so we're going to be coming up on that trick that Greenham was talking about where we're taking intentional damage to get the big key, which we call the big key skip, even though we're not skipping the big key. And again, we're very creative in the Link to the Past community.
And also inaccurate.
Yes. But you see there, Greffery and Error both taking a hit from the Popo to give them iframes, and then they, I guess, move into the anti-fairies there, and then you kind of lose your iframes for just enough time to step on the switch, which triggers that chest. The way to do that room otherwise is to kill everything in the room, and then the anti-fairies disperse, then you can lift the pot and hit the switch, but that's slow.
Yeah, exactly. And that's actually a pretty scary part when you do skip the Sanctuary Heart. Getting damaged by that Popo there, the wiggly guys with all the tentacles on them, is only going to do a 1 heart of damage, whereas getting hit by the Anti-Fairy will do more than that. So grabbing those extra hearts in the room afterwards is probably a good idea. We saw Elmagus do that, and it's going to leave him with a little more health throughout the rest of the dungeon. Gref struggling a little bit with the Igors. That's actually a really scary room because the switch that you have to hit is underneath those Igors, so it can be kind of frightening to just kind of walk into those blindly. Holy moly.
Yeah, it's funny because like with Sankard, this is not really that scary of a dungeon. Like you can just kind of come in here and do your thing and whatever. But like when you don't have Sankard, I don't. There's just something about it just makes it that much scarier.
Yeah, everything just gets amped up in the severity factor. You can just be dead in an instant. So Gref makes it out alive though. Escape from Eastern and escape as well apparently. Ares gonna be safe, and Magus just behind.
Very nice fights from all three of these guys. I wonder if any of them will get a gold split after skipping Sankar. It doesn't look like it. Too bad.
I think
It
Ares
saves 3 seconds, so.
I know Ares did at least a few practice runs without it, so maybe he got his free fake gold there.
Maybe. Alright, so now we're talking to Sahasrarla, the cowboy on the east side. He is going to give us the boots. Behind him there are rupees and bombs. And some players will grab those just out of safety, but I think that, well, I know Greffery is skipping them. Error will probably also skip them. I'm not sure about Elmagus, because there's another rupee route that we can do, which we'll explain when we get there. But oh yeah, so all three of them are going to be doing the same rupee route, which we'll get to later. So right now we're just off to get the book first so that we can get into Desert Palace. There is a spin speed that some people do here, which I actually didn't even talk about spin speed because it's something just so basic in this game that you do a lot of places. But you saw them do the spin speed outside of Sahasrarla's hut, where they seem to be going really fast without actually dashing. And that is... I guess the trick that you do, and it's only available on the Japanese 1.0 version, I think.
Yeah, that's correct.
Yes, okay. And basically what you do is you charge up your sword, and as you release it, you move your finger over to B, A, to A. Sorry. I have to look at my controller every time because I don't know. But what it does is it just activates spin speed, and so when you come off of a ladder, like you see Elmagus and doing there, you have to come off cardinally, but it, I guess, puts it into motion, and you essentially get the dash speed without dashing, is all that is, so it's pretty nice. It's fast.
Yep, and you can freely change directions also while you're moving around, so it's very handy. It always looks like it saves more time than it actually does. Across the whole run, it's, you know, not a huge amount of time, but it is a cool trick, and it allows us to go a little bit faster, so why not do it, right?
Why not? Alright, opening up Desert. We got Greffery doing it. Elmagus and Error are like screen for screen right now. Almost. Oh wait, never mind, one of them's behind. Shh.
I didn't hear anything.
exactly.
All right, so Gref walked into desert at 1350 on his timer, it looked like. 59 for Magus, so 203 for Airy, so just mere seconds apart for everyone. And that can definitely change very quickly with the boss of this dungeon that is coming up. The Land Molus fight is full of RNG and can go anywhere from exceedingly well, in finishing the fight in 2 cycles, or you could just get caught in there for a day. It seems like.
Okay. So we just saw Greffery go through this cannonball room here, which has some RNG. You saw Elmagus almost got hit by the cannonballs, but he was able to dodge them. Sometimes you can just dash straight through them, which is pretty nice. But yeah, unfortunately, you're not always that lucky. There are also a few pots that they have to grab here for arrows. That's because you need arrows to defeat the boss at the end quickly. So you'll see them grabbing some specific pots where we know that there are arrows. They want to get as close to 30 as they can, because that'll give them the best shot. And also we need arrows later, so it's nice to have some left over after your Landmo fight. So yeah, you'll see them grabbing some arrows. There's also a safety pot at the end of the dungeon, so Arrow right now is pretty low on arrows, so he may have to get that safety pot at the end of the dungeon.
Yeah, having 22 here, I would definitely foresee him grabbing those. I would highly recommend him doing as such. Airy was going for a somewhat riskier spin speed there, coming out of desert on the way to the back half of it. Can be a little dangerous because when you are in that glitch state, if you touch a ledge at all, you're just going to instantly hop off of it. So if you do end up running into that, you're just going to hop off there and have to go through the first part of desert again.
Yeah, it's a pretty significant time loss for the risk that it is, because you save, like, I think 10 frames or something by actually doing that spin speed. Maybe it's 20 frames. Maybe it's more. I don't know. But it's not very much. It's less than a second.
Alright, so Gref is going to be the first one into the Landmo fight here. He's going to be aiming to put 4 arrows into each one of the 3 worms here. After the first cycle here, the spot at which the Landmo spawn is completely random, and then also for every cycle, the length that they jump and the direction that they go is also pretty much entirely random. So dealing with that RNG and trying to get the fight over as quickly as possible is the name of the game here. Looks like Gref finishes it up nicely. That might have been late 3, early 4.
Yeah, it's hard to count sometimes.
Yeah, when you're trying to watch 3 at once. Magus has to be a little bit careful here. He's at half a heart. If he gets hit by a rock, a stray rock, or a landmo at all, he is dead. It's a little bit more dangerous now with this last worm because the rocks shoot out in 8 directions as opposed to 4, but he makes it through alive, so everyone gets out of desert just fine.
Phew. Alright, so I guess on Greffery's screen we're gonna see this first. I think he's gonna do it, but anyway, we've got this trick called fake flippers, where we are going to swim without the flippers in this game. In order to swim, you need the flippers, but in this one spot here, we can trick the game into thinking we have the flippers when we don't. So what Gref is gonna do is line himself up with this wall, slash that bush, and then walk up, and he jumps in the water, and at the same time that he transitions the screen, so the game doesn't really know what to do with you, so it just assumes that you have the flippers and lets you swim. But if you were to get hit on that screen or the next screen, then, or I guess going into the next screen, I should say, then you can actually soft lock the game.
Yeah, the game has no idea where to put you since you came from a screen that it's not expecting you to have been on, so yeah, that would end up in a soft lock, but everyone makes it through just fine here. And now we're going to be running into an old man in the caves here. I'm sure he's fine.
This is
He-
totally safe.
He just needs a little help finding his way home, which we are happy to provide. I mean, we're saving the world. Why not? We can take a small amount of time out of our speed run here to escort this guy. Well, we will get a pretty nice reward, I suppose, at the end for our efforts, which is the magic mirror.
Oh
But
boy.
we do end up on Death Mountain, which is a terrible, horrible place.
Yes, it has that name for a reason. There are these boulders falling down, and they're squirrels that if you slash them, then they become solid and they can block you from getting around. Later on, once you're in the Dark World, or beaten Aghanim, there's Tektites up there, like big Tektites. And then there's this bully, and this guy's bullying. And if you talk to the guy that he's bullying, he has like 10 text boxes.
It takes so long to talk to him. He has so much to say. There's more lore, I think, in that story than throughout the rest of the
Yeah.
game.
Speaking of getting blocked, see, that's what I mean about the squirrels. You hit them, they go solid, and they block your way. So, unfortunately, Greffery getting blocked going into Hera, but it's all good. He's there now. I think getting blocked by a squirrel is about 9 seconds of time loss. It's pretty significant.
Yeah. Anywhere from like 8 to 10 seconds, yeah.
Which would be 9.
And there's nothing you can do about it.
Yeah.
Just cry to yourself, I suppose.
All right,
All
so
right.
first...
Sorry, something I'm particularly excited to see here are the difference in strats here between Eri and Gref. Actually, and Magus too. Magus and Gref are both using the boomerang here, but Eri is doing a version of the dungeon where you don't use the boomerang at all. They're pretty even in timing. Using the boomerang can be a little bit faster, assuming you're pretty much perfect with your execution of all the strats, which with both of our boom users here, we have not exactly seen yet, but Eri is just taking a very safe approach here. Really a lot less moving parts and just poking all these tiles, and then he's going to throw one of these pots at the very last one in order to kill it as quickly as possible and open the door and be on his way.
We did see Elmagus try out what we call a boom dash, which is an item dash with the boomerang, and the goal in that room is to hit the crystal switch and then get on the pegs in order to get iframes for the entire room. And that just makes the next room quicker and also makes the tile room safer. But he unfortunately did not hit the switch with the boomerang. It can be a little bit tricky to execute, but that's okay.
And Eri and Magus here are both in a tough room, the beetle room, but they both get out pretty quickly. I think Gref kind of struggled a little bit with it. There's some very subtle RNG in that room that you have to deal with. So that's going to give these other guys a little bit of time to catch up to Gref here.
And Gref just did the first of many bomb jumps in this game. Essentially, you just place a bomb in a certain spot and it'll blast you over a hole. So we use it here in Palace of Darkness, in Ice Palace, and in Skull Woods. So you'll see it 3 more times. A little bit different each time, though. But yeah, all of them got it pretty nicely. The biggest risk, I think, for the bomb jump in this dungeon is just either falling in the hole or, you know, not making it over. But other than that, it's a pretty simple trick.
Yeah. Speaking of falling in holes, this is apparently just what Hera is all about. So the Moldorm fight here, there's this hole in the center that you definitely do not want to take a visit down. I suggest you just ask Scrivo what's down there. Yo, Eri made up a really solid chunk of time on that Moldorm fight, actually,
Yeah.
on Gref. Wow, and you can see just how much of a troll Moldorm can be on Magus's screen there. But it's a very difficult fight. Lots of RNG, and his movement is pretty much entirely random. So, and then getting knocked down there is really tough because it completely resets Moldorm's health. So when you go back up, the fight is just completely started over.
That squirrel was waiting for Greffery when he came back out too.
He's got his
but-
number.
Yeah, exactly. Thankfully didn't get blocked though. We saw both Elmagus and Error do a spin speed outside the dungeon. That's another one that's kind of risky, I guess, because you could get hit by the squirrel, and taking damage here is not ideal. But I guess we just start explaining tree rupees since we're about to see it right now. You're going to see Eriror and Greffery, and I guess Elmagus in a minute. Pull a tree, they get blue rupees. What they're going to do from here is kill 4 more enemies without taking any damage and pull another tree, and that's going to give them 20 rupees. That's going to give them more than 20 rupees. It's going to give them 20 rupees. So 80 rupees in total.
Doing math on stream, impossible.
I can't do-
Confirmed.
I was
Yeah,
an arts major.
red rupees are gonna come out when they pull that second tree, and red rupees are worth 20 apiece, and 4 of them are gonna come out, which gives you 80.
I like 420 rupees better. Okay.
Same actually.
Yeah. Elmagus unfortunately taking some damage there, which means that resets his tree rupees. So when he goes and pulls on the tree that would normally, which will give both Gref and Eriror the red rupees, is going to give him green rupees, unless he kills 4 enemies and will give him blue rupees. So he's going to actually have to go for a backup, which he can do in the courtyard of the castle where they're going to be headed to. There's another tree there that they can pull. So as long as he is able to kill 4 enemies on his way to the castle without taking any damage, he can pull that tree for his red rupees. And if he misses that, then his next backup is probably going to be Sahasrahla, I imagine. Going back to that hut in the back and getting the rupees in the chest.
Yeah, so over the alternate rupee route, which is getting the rupees behind Sahasrahla, this tree rupees route saves maybe about 7 seconds if you do everything really, really well. Luckily, there are a lot of backups, but obviously once you start getting into those backups, you're just kind of eating into that time save. So obviously you want to avoid having to do those if at all possible. I do want to give a really quick shout out to Ari, who has opted to use the 4-character file name that was provided to him, whereas the other 2 runners went for the 3-letter file name. Apparently they just need the handicap of the other few frames to catch up to Ari here, so.
Shoutouts to Author Blues. Alright, so we've got Elmagus doing the backup here. Thankfully he doesn't need all of those rupees. You only need 110 to get into Palace of Darkness, which is why we're grabbing these rupees in the first place. So he's got enough right now. You actually get 6 free ones in Aghanim's Tower, which is where Greffery and Eriror are. So that's pretty nice.
And you saw Gref there just dashed through a locked door, and you know, usually if you've tried that casually and just tried to dash into there, you're like, oh hey, I've got a key, there's a door, I've got my boots, let's go. And you just, you know, run face first into it and bonk off of it, and you have no idea why. Well, everything in this game is pretty much lined up on a grid, and this includes the unlock trigger for the door themselves. So if you start Link on a multiple of 4 pixels away from that trigger, moving at dash speed, which happens to be 4 pixels per frame, will allow you to actually hit that trigger and unlock the door before you even hit the door. So it just allows you to run straight through it. So pretty cool. Saves you a little bit of time here and there.
Yeah, you'll see, I guess we saw them use that potentially in Desert, and you'll see it a few more times in the run, so it's a pretty cool trick. Alright, these guys are utilizing arrows in this room just to kill those red guards quicker. Spinning these other ones here. Oop. In the next room that Eriror is going to be in, and so is Greffery, is Circle of Pots. And this one, I guess, well, okay, Eriror got like the good RNG and Greffery got less than good RNG. Ooh!
Holy moly, he's at 1 heart.
He only has 1 heart now, so that room, probably one of the worst in the dungeon, I think, but...
Let us not forget that he would have 2 hearts right now if he picked up the Sync heart.
Yes. Shoutouts to Sync heart.
So he actually has to be a little bit careful here. This last guard especially, he can turn very quickly when you're not expecting it, and just knock you off, which would poke you, and then you would take damage from falling as well, and Gref would be dead. He's also got to be pretty careful in this Aghanim fight. It's not actually trivial, even though all you're doing is just, you know, spinning and reflecting the shots that he throws at you, but not getting hit by the blue ball attacks, which are the undesirable ones that we don't want to see in this fight because they just straight up lose you time. They can actually be a little bit hard to dodge because they spread out after you hit them. So you got to be careful not to get hit by 2 of those or just run into Aga himself.
Yeah, Gref can pretty much take 1 hit without dying, so he's got to be careful. But it looks like we've got, I think, 1 blue ball on each side so far. And Elmagus is just entering the fight here. He's got a healthy amount of hearts, though, so he's in pretty good shape.
Please,
Yeah,
please
go for
do.
it.
Okay, let's say that again because I forgot to unmute my mic, so no one heard what I just said to start with. Okay, let's read some donations. How about that? While they're counting blue
Sounds
balls.
good.
Yeah, great.
Redo. Okay, I just talked for like 15 seconds and no one in chat heard me. We got a $20 donation from J question mark, who just commentated the Legend of Mana run. Thanks to all of the awesome folks out there that are donating to help out. It's really heartwarming to see the community come together like this. He put that $20 towards naming Vivi Echo in Final Fantasy IX tomorrow. We had a $1 donation from Lucas Sleesman. Just donated to say lol, lots of love. But seriously guys, I'd like to see Thief and Monk in Final Fantasy I GBA run. So this donation goes to Monk as the most powerful FF1 character. Not. $42.39 from Dude SF with no message, but he put that towards Monk and Black Mage in the Final Fantasy I run. And a $100 donation from a background guy 02 with no message, but he put it towards filling out the Lunar Silver Star incentives. So that puts us at $500 already, you guys. Thank you.
Wow, that's amazing. Good job, guys.
Yeah, we're only 2 runs in. That's pretty impressive for this amount of time. Thank you guys so much for the support.
Alright, so I guess we're headed off to Palace of Darkness, and all that money we spent all that time getting is just going to be gone in a second. So we've got Eriror here, he's got Kiki the monkey, gives Kiki 10 rupees to start out, and then once you actually get up to Palace of Darkness, Kiki's like, nah man, I need 100 more. So you're like, alright, fine, just take it.
I do not have good faith on where this money is going. I do not think this monkey is reinvesting this properly. I don't know if I can actually support his habit anymore. I think I'm just going to skip him from now on.
Okay. That's fine. Alright, so what's there to say about Palace of Darkness? There's probably one of the hardest tricks, or notoriously one of the hardest tricks in the game is in this dungeon, which we call the hammer jump, which they'll be coming up to in a little bit, in a couple minutes, so we'll explain it when we get there, but I think it's probably one of the tricks that people, when learning this game, think is like the hardest trick in the game, so.
Yeah, for sure, and it saves a pretty good chunk of time in this dungeon too, so it's not, absolutely required that you learn it when you're first starting out with the run or anything, but once you start getting down into the 140, 130 range, you'll probably be looking to pick it up.
Yeah, there was a member of the community named Blank who actually did a video about the difference between going down to the basement to get the key, which is what you're usually supposed to do, or doing the hammer jump by getting 30 buffers. And the hammer jump with 30 buffers saved 4 seconds still over going down to the basement to get the key. So you can actually really be bad at hammer jump and still save some time over going down to the basement. I guess failing it is really where you start to lose time, big time.
There's very little room for excuses, I think, on it if you're able to land it at all with some sort of consistency. But we're going to see it now on Ares' side here. So he's going to place the bomb on a very specific coordinate, and also put Link on a very specific coordinate in relation to the bomb, and that is going to send him over the gap into the railing so that he can grab this hammer without having to go down to the basement, as Emma explained.
Just a note here, Greffery has gotten a fairy drop. Normally in this game, we like to manipulate our drops in order to get that fairy later on in the game, so we'll get it later in Turtle Rock. There are certain enemies that you can kill that will drop certain things, and those mini Helmasaurs, the ones that you saw on the bridge, unfortunately drop fairies. So you want to kill as little as them as possible before you get to Turtle Rock, in order to not trigger that fairy drop. So unfortunately, Greffery has potentially lost the fairy in Turtle Rock. I guess something can change before then, but yeah. So that's the only thing. It's just like a safety measure, I guess, when you don't have powder or other safeties that you grab.
Yeah, for sure. And man, everyone's taken quite a bit of damage throughout this dungeon. We see Magus here is sitting at 3 hearts, and he's going to be able to get 3 back, which actually, it's kind of great that he does not have Sync Heart in this instance, because getting these 3 hearts here is going to give him sword beams, which is actually pretty important for the basement. If you look at Airy here, he does not have sword beams, so he needs to switch to the boomerang. Nice!
Wow,
Backwards
nice.
diagonal boomerang. He's been practicing some all dungeon strats, it looks like, so that doesn't really cost him that much time. Normally, if you don't do that strat with the boomerang, you have to walk above it and then just throw it directly to the right. But since Gref and Magus are both going to have sword beams when they go down into the basement, they can just beam that crystal switch there.
Yeah, it saves about like a menu, mostly, or 2 menus, I guess. So it's pretty nice to have sword beams here. You saw Greffery in the turtle room. That one, probably the worst room in the dungeon, but Greffery got through it pretty nicely. Elmagus will be coming up on it soon, and then these two, or I guess all of them are going to be fighting Helmasaur.
Wow. And speaking of Helmasaur, he's dead on Ares' side before we even get a chance to talk about the fight. You see Gref here is using the hammer on Helma's mask. Needs 17 hits to get that thing off, and then needs another 3 hammer hits and a spin optimally to finish off the second phase of the fight here. We see Gref gets 3 hammer hits now and finishes up with a spin. Very nice fight from both the guys who are done right now, and Magus is going to have his attempt now.
Yeah, and unfortunately, Helma's spitting out some fireballs. Oof, not what you want to see. But Elmagus actually just despawned the fireballs, so if you are on the last hit for Helma's mask, and he shoots out a fireball, if you hit the mask off, when the fireball comes out, then you can actually despawn it. So it's nice to kind of wait a little bit to see if he's gonna spit out a fireball, so you can despawn it and don't have to deal with it.
Yeah, that was very well handled by him, and may have actually saved his fight. We can't really be sure, because if he would have taken another hit there, he was out of there.
Yeah, this is a fight that's really nice to have Sync Heart, because Helma does, and all of his attacks do 2 hearts of damage. So when you have Sync Heart, you still have that like 1 heart left over if things go really poorly. But yeah, without Sync Heart, you just can lose it all.
Yeah, you really feel the lack of it here, probably in that boss fight the most. So all 3 of our runners being through that point now, probably all breathing a pretty big sigh of relief at this point.
Yes, I imagine. So I guess we missed it on Arrow's side, but we're going to see it in Gref right here. Doing an item dash, he's using the hammer and the dash at the same time, so Y and A at the same time, and that essentially you can use your item while you're dashing, so it just clears those pegs quicker. You'll see quite a few item dashes throughout the run, but that's just one example there.
Yep, it's just another Japanese 1.0 version exclusive glitch that we take advantage of here and there throughout the run. You'll see it most often used with the hammer to save time, but you definitely see it in a few other places, and we'll try to point those out when they happen.
Yep, so these guys are going to dig up this flute, and then Eriror is going to do another spin speed here. And that's just to get past this red guard right there. He's fastest guard in Hyrule. We've nicknamed him Usain Bolt because for some reason he's just extremely fast, and it's
He
just
has
hard to get past.
permanent spin speed cheat on, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, definitely. So that's just an easy way to get past him without taking damage, is just to do a spin speed here. Plus it's faster overall for the screen, so very nice. And then we've got Error releasing the duck, and that duck will be of great use to us throughout this run.
Yeah, he's going to greatly reduce the amount of overworld traveling that we have to do by letting us just fly from one location to another. So he's this game's version of quick travel, I guess.
Yeah, Error unfortunately taking some damage in the well, I guess we call it the Apple Bapple screen, but that's actually the backup. And we call the screen
The screen named after the strat you don't want to do on it.
Yeah, exactly. Other people have called it the Three Musketeers screen. But
We need help with our screen
Yes.
names, please, guys. If you have
Yeah.
any suggestions.
if you are at all creative, please come to Link to the Past community and name our rooms for us. Because I can't even imagine how many like skeleton rooms we have and like hellways we have. Like, it's pretty
Yeah.
bad. Alright, so we've got Error inside of Thieves Town. This dungeon isn't too bad, I don't think, for being where it is in the game. You do have Master Sword, so, I mean, that really doesn't matter here a whole lot, especially for the boss, because the boss at the end just requires 3 hits per phase, and you can use, like, pretty much any weapon to do that. So having the Master Sword here is not going to make a difference on the boss at all.
Yep, this dungeon really, I think, with the skill level of these 3 runners, they're not too terribly worried about dying or anything within this dungeon. The only kind of scary room Eri is coming up on right now, which is one of the hellways that we have in the game, one of like 3 or 4, and he does get the one exact pixel. There's one X coordinate you can actually dash up through the middle of that room perfectly, and if you get good RNG from all the enemies in that room, you can just dash straight through it without having to do anything else.
Just dash straight through.
It's a pretty good speed run right there.
Greffery also getting the God Pixel. Very nice. Alright. And these little, well, I call them grasshoppers. People have different names for them. But the little green guys running around, they do 2 hearts of damage each. So they do have to be a little bit careful around them, because that packs a punch. I mean, that's as much damage as Helmasaur does to you. So just got to be a little bit careful in these rooms here. These guys usually don't have any issues with those, though.
How about Komodo cicadas? Is that fine? Does that work?
Sure. Yeah, that's fine. But I mean, grasshopper is just easier to say.
Crickets is just wrong, you know, like
Yeah.
they're clearly green, okay?
Yeah, and if you look on the wiki, it says that they're grasshoppers. So
Case
grasshopper-like creatures.
All right, so Aries at 3 hearts here. There are some hearts underneath pots that he can opt to pick up in this prison, but I think he feels pretty confident with the rest of his Thieves Town here. So he's just gonna keep on trucking straight through. Gonna get the Titan's mitts here, which allow you to pick up almost everything in the game on the ground. So it's gonna give us access to some areas that we need to get to finish the game.
Yep, and Aries going to be coming up on Blind, the boss. Like I said earlier, takes 3 hits per phase. There are 3 phases, so 9 hits in total. And
He did math on stream again. Holy crap!
yeah, and this time they actually did the math. 420 rupees for 80.
And 9 hits on one.
Yeah. So yeah, it takes 3 hits per phase, and it's a scripted fight, so if you just move the same way every time, then Blind should also move the same way every time. So yeah, that's basically it.
Yep.
I mean, this is probably one of the most intimidating bosses, I think, for casual players, for new players to the game. I remember when I first started, I didn't know the script, and I was using like 2 fairies here. Like,
Oh yeah, it
was-
turns into absolute madness if you don't know what's going on.
yeah, it's like actual chaos. So, because the heads fly off and they're shooting lasers, and then if blind goes to the bottom of the room, and then you have to like chase them down. It's a whole thing. So, but thankfully we have been able to manipulate it, so it's no big deal. And this is the shortest text, or Dark World Crystal text, I guess, in the game. I guess for anybody who's a rando player, they forget that there's text in the game. But, yeah, there's a lot.
Yeah, I don't necessarily mind the downtime so much, though. It's really the only text matching is kind of the only quote unquote downtime you have in this speedrun, so it is kind of a decent time to collect yourself a little bit before the next segment. And
Yeah, I agree with that completely. I don't think that going from like one segment straight into another would be helpful at all for a speedrun. So the text is nice to just kind of sit there, chill for a bit, think about what you got to do next, and yeah, get back into it. All right, so we're picking up a frog, and in the light world, he's going to turn into a blacksmith. And he is going to give us our tempered sword for the low cost of 10 rupees. What a deal. And after we save this guy, we're going to go get more rupees so we can buy flippers later for the high price of 500 rupees. So you have to leave here with at least 500 rupees.
10 rupees is such a deal. I don't know why we don't just go to Lost Woods and collect all those like fake master swords that are sitting around there and just go get them all tempered and then just resell those swords. Like, you're gonna make a killing, right?
Yeah, of course. Sell them for more than 10 rupees even.
But probably the smith is gonna catch on to your game really quick. He's like, I gave you the 10 rupee deal a few times because you saved my life and all, but enough is enough. Okay, I'm losing like food out of my mouth here. I need to eat, man.
You don't think that would be like a lifetime deal for Link? Like, okay, you saved my life, so
You'd think it would be, but these businessmen in Hyrule, they can be pretty stingy.
This is true. Alright.
Oh no, I'm getting reports from the chat that Eri bailed out of Fence Dash.
Gref got it though, so yay, Gref.
Well, there is some hope.
Alright, so Eri is going to be doing this mummy statue room. Another very creative name.
Oh.
And it's already going as expected. So
This is just giving me just like flashbacks right now. Holy crap.
You sure you want to do the weekly today? Or?
No, I think this just convinced me to sit it out, actually.
Yeah.
So, yeah, he demonstrated like a billion versions of things that can go wrong in that room right there. Number one being, if you try to hit A to grab the statue and pull it too quickly, you get punished for trying to go too fast. You're just going to kick up dust and start a dash and not pull the statue at all. And then the mummy enemy is got to be one of the worst coded things in existence, like throughout all video games, because they don't take knockback sometimes, and their movement is just completely erratic.
They can move like through things, like they can go like through your sword almost, and like come like through the like the statue, like you saw on Aries side, like it just like came up and into the where the switch is. Like it just, I don't know, they're just
It's not fair, man.
No, it's just not fair. It isn't. They're the hardest enemy in the game by far to manage. Elmagus,
But all three runners are finally past it there. Yeah, he put on a clinic.
Yeah, that was pretty nice. Alright, so now we are in the final part of Skull Woods. It's pretty quick. There's not much going on. We got this mummy hellway here. And this is a strategy that Eriror is doing that our good friend Joe D'Amelio kind of, I guess it's attributed to him mostly. But it's just it's a good quick way to get through the room without having to do the optimal strat, which can be pretty difficult. Looks like Gref's gonna do the same.
Ooh, a slightly different variation of it, but it looks pretty fast as well. Yeah, probably, you know, like you said, not much time difference either between that and the optimal strat. And Aerie, ooh, that was nice.
Nice.
So
9 out of 10.
one of the quirks about the Mothula fight is when you slash him and you damage him, if he happens to touch a spike after that, the game is coded in such a way to where Moth does not actually take damage in that instance. So, okay, 1 second here.
Ooh.
Gref is at 1 heart.
Ooh.
He would be at 2 if he had sync, but he's fine. Okay. So back to how this fight works. You saw Aerie there kind of had Moth pinned up against those spikes, so he knew that if he just straight up slashed him, Moth wasn't going to take any damage. However, if you charge your sword and you poke Mothula, and then you also do a dash charge and hold A down for a long enough period of time after that, you will actually register full slash damage, and it will not be affected by the spike bug, where it actually just overwrites and changes the damage to 0. So very nice usage of that to finish up that fight there. It can be very difficult to handle when Mothula just decides to take up residence on the top half of the room.
Elmagus gets through pretty nicely as well. Now we've got Eriror heading up to Death Mountain to get his ether, which is on the tablet up here. People do this in different spots in the run. I don't know that I've ever seen someone do it before Ice Palace.
This is pretty unique to Aerie. I think this is something that he just kind of accidentally started doing in his runs early on, and he just never changed it, which is totally fine. Like you said, it really is not a big difference. Like when you do this shopping trip, it can really only play into it in terms of your menus, because you have different items, and then also your health that you have available to you. So by opting to do it earlier here, or even in the swamp segment, and not doing it in the mire segment, it can be a little better, because mire is a very, very dangerous dungeon, and you really want to go in there with full health if at all possible. So avoiding that trip up to Death Mountain during that segment could be pretty nice.
Yeah, for sure. Eriror is now also getting his ice rod, but he took some damage from a crab outside. Did him in for 2 hearts. Going into Ice Palace even with less hearts is pretty daunting. Ice Palace is a pretty tough dungeon. There's just a lot of enemies, and they hit hard, and they have dumb RNG, and it just sucks. So, and then he's also down a heart container because it doesn't have the sanctuary heart. So. We'll see how Ice Palace goes for him. Hopefully it's okay. But I guess we'll see a little bit of a difference here. Like, it's going to look like Gref is ahead when he's, like, really not actually ahead. So.
Yeah, exactly. It'll look a little weird for a little bit, but once we get back into Mire, everything will sync back up again, and we'll have a better idea of where everyone is in relation to each other.
So Gref getting his slippers here. They cost 500 rupees. And then he will be making his way off to Ice Palace. I think this overworld before Ice Palace is probably one of the hardest in the game.
It certainly ranks up there for sure. I would say this overworld and the overworld for Thieves Town after Palace of Darkness are both very, very difficult.
I would agree with that.
And a lot of it is because of this Zora's Domain screen here. It's one of the longest screens in the entire game. It's pretty much a minute by itself. So it's very hard to optimize. If you jump off into the water in any of these parts, you lose about a second. So, you were talking about Aerie being a little low on health there. It looks like he found at least 1 heart already. There are a few spots that he can try to farm a heart. After he gets the flippers here and exits the domain, he can pick up a rock, and also the crabs outside there can potentially drop a heart for him. But something about this game is that like 90% of the time when you try to farm a heart, you're going to end up losing too. So um, you'll kind of see some runners farm and some not, because some have just learned over time, every time I try to do this and I'm trying to get back up to full health, I just end up losing more anyway, so I'm just not going to bother with it. So I'm kind of interested to see what Eri does here.
Yeah, that's definitely a thing that happens. Sometimes it's better to just not go for the health.
Yeah, looks like Eri's taking that route.
Yeah.
Do not blame him.
Nope. So here's another one of the, or I guess one of the many dumb rooms in Ice Palace where Gref is. Those jellies can really get in the way, and then they electrify, like, right as soon as you're slashing, so you get damaged. Like, it's just stupid. So yeah, and then this next room is the conveyor room. This one also stupid. Just because look at it. I mean, there's spikes, there's jellies, there's things coming out of the wall. Like, it doesn't look like a nice place to be, and it's not. Here's another bomb jump that we've got. This is the third of 4, and he, does it very nicely. That one's a little bit more lenient than the hammer jump, though, so it's not as bad. But
yeah, you don't have to deal with the bridge falling down, so you're not like on a timer of any sort necessarily. Obviously, you want to go fast, but you're not going to have to restart the trick or anything if you take too long. So
Right.
that trick does skip a pretty good portion of the dungeon, so it's pretty important. Oh, that save from Eri! That was so nice. He got screwed over by those jellies that you were talking about, and was able to still pick up the bomb and then run himself over to the hole and to make sure that it actually got blown up. That was nice. Alright, so Greffery's going to be falling into the boss fight for this dungeon. Very, very dangerous boss fight. The puffs look very friendly and cuddly, however, I assure you they are not. They do 4 hearts of damage apiece, and the falling ice that you have to deal with does 2, so if Gref takes 2 hugs from these puffs here, the fight would be over. Hopefully that's not going to happen. He's going to spin and do 6 slashes on these puffs into the corner. Hopefully the puffs don't move out of that corner at all. Well executed, and he is out of that fight.
Yeah, it's a very nice fight. Those puffs must be made of, like, sulfur or something.
Yeah, some gas that you don't want to interact with, that's for sure.
Big balls of pollution. Alright, so you have Elmagus doing the fight here as well. Ooh, he got hit by some ice, so now he's gonna have to maneuver around.
Very careful here. Yeah, he still needs a lot of damage on all of these puffs, so he's going to be trying to go for spins, which can be a little dangerous because they lock Link in place when he releases the spin. It kind of reduces Link's mobility a little bit. Eri is having his fight. Okay, Eri cleans up his fight, but Agus is still trying to survive.
Ooh, he makes it through. Wow. Oh my goodness.
Sweating or no? Sweating or no?
Yes, and not just because it's very hot today. Whew, okay. Well, now we have a whole segment to breathe because we're going to swamp, and it's a pretty easy segment.
This is a very well placed dungeon.
Yeah, definitely. Right in between 2 really tough dungeons. So it's one of the dungeons where, like, we call it like the dungeon of 1,000 paper cuts, because normally in, like, you're playing this game casually, this is the second crystal, so you would, I guess, normally come here after Palace of Darkness, the second Dark World dungeon, and you'd have the Master Sword and you'd have less hearts and all that. So, but we do this like way later in the run for routing purposes, obviously, and so we really hit hard in this dungeon. Like, we kill everything in one hit, and like things don't do a lot of damage to us, so it's pretty nice. It's kind of like a nice break after Ice Palace, after a scary cold stare fight, and to come here and just kind of chill for a bit. But the thing is that the RNG in this dungeon is just awful sometimes. Like, you can really have a bad time because of RNG. So that's really the biggest thing to look out for here.
Yep, lots of little patterns here and there to deal with. Enemies can just randomly hit you out of dashes for seemingly no reason. But other than that, dungeon's pretty straightforward.
Yeah, just a lot of keys grabbing and lever pushing, and that's about it. There is the boss at the end is Argus, and there is a 0 cycle strategy for that boss, which is very difficult to do, and something that a lot of people don't pick up until they're in the 126, 125 range. So we'll see if any of these guys attempt it. They may just opt out of it for safety, but we'll see.
And we're seeing Magus here is doing his collection segment. He's getting the ether and the ice rod now during this segment. So he's going to be essentially the gap between him and Eri is going to be consistent now once he actually gets into swamp. So we'll have a good idea of that. But until Greff does his collection in Mire and then gets into there, we won't quite know exactly where everyone is in relation to each other.
Yeah, and I actually like where Elmagus is doing his ether and ice rod. That's where I do mine as well. And there's actually not very many of us that do it this way, but I personally think it's the best way because doing it in the Mire segment only saves roughly 1 second, and it's only if you can do this trick on Death Mountain when you're climbing up the ladder that we call sword climb, which is basically getting the dash speed up the ladder. So it saves about 1 second. But the problem is that if you take any damage, then you're trying to farm for extra hearts, you're just losing all the time you saved. So it's like, what was the point even?
Yeah, exactly.
And if you don't get health back, then you're going into Mire with less hearts, which can be very daunting, and then make you play safer and slower in the dungeon. So personally, I like to do ether and ice rod before swamp, because swamp doesn't really matter all that much. If I take a bunch of damage before I go in, it's not a big deal. Like, I can usually survive it anyway. So
when you think about it logically, you're like, well, why wouldn't anyone? Why don't we just everyone do it this way? But I think it's one of those things where it's kind of built into tradition almost, because people have been comparing segment times obviously for so long, and I think that's one of the reasons people do it, is because, well, I don't know like how my time ranks in comparison to everyone else, but that's kind of secondary, I think, to having a consistently fast and healthy speed run. So yeah, it's definitely a good strat, and I would recommend more people investigate it for themselves.
Yeah, for sure. All right, so we're gonna see another item dash from Greff right here with the hook shot. And you can see Link's kind of like jittering as he walks, and that's how you know that you got that item dash. It just makes him move a little bit faster in the room, and you can also pick up the pot, but the one that has a switch under it where you put the statue. You can pick that up quicker. So it's definitely like one of those little things, but saves a good chunk of time, really. Well, when I say good chunk of time, I'm talking like not very much time, but I mean, for something that's not too hard to do, it's pretty good.
Yeah, it's one of those things where it's just like, well, it's pretty easy to do it anyway, so why wouldn't you just at least try it? It's not going to affect you negatively too much. All right, so it looks like Greff is going to be the first one into the Argus fight here. I'm pretty sure he's going to opt for a more standard fight where he just pulls each puff individually and slashes at it. So
yeah, and since we have the tempered sword here, which is actually I guess more powerful than normal, or I guess than the game expects you to be at this point, you can kill those puffs with 1 slash. I believe when you have the master sword, it takes 2 slashes per puff.
Yeah.
Ooh. And that's the other thing, you don't want to stand above Argus, because when he goes up, I mean, there's like, this game's not 3D, so like
it tries very hard to convince you that it is, though.
Yeah, but when you stand above him like that, you get hit by him, even though when you think about it, if Argus was going straight up, he's not going to hit you if you're standing above him. But
yeah,
we weren't that sophisticated in 1990, so
that's definitely caught that's caught a number of runners unaware. Like I've seen almost every new speedrunner get affected by that. So, oh, Airy was going for the 0 cycle strat there. Unfortunately, got hit. He's doing this by having the sword out and doing a hook dash, which puts you into this glitch state where you can just pull a puff and it will instantly poke it and kill it. But unfortunately, it looked like he got hit out of that. And going for the fire rod quick kill on the second phase there, gets it nicely. That saves about a second.
Yeah, very nice. The 0 cycle is very hard. Like, you have to have pretty precise timing for your hook shots in order to pull it off. I think the most I've done is like 3 puffs. But I didn't really practice it for very long. But yeah, it's pretty tough.
It's a it's probably the toughest quick kill boss strat in this entire speedrun. It takes a lot of practice to get it down to where you can do it consistently. I think anyone is pretty capable of doing it, once after a decent amount of practice, but being able to do it consistently is a whole other animal.
Yeah, for sure. So now we're going to see Gref getting his Ether and Ice Rod right before the Meyer segment. And then we're going to see Eriror go straight to Meyer, and I guess we can talk about the new tech now that that we're here.
Yeah.
I don't know the technical part of it, so I give like the layman's terms because I have literally no idea what's going on. I just know like what happens. But essentially, you're going like when Eriror is going to flute over to 6, which is where Meyer entrance is. And he's going to lift the rock and enter the warp in a certain way so that when the bird leaves the screen, it leaves the screen high. So I guess you'll see what I mean in a second here. So he goes in from the bottom, and then we won't really see anything until later on in the dungeon. But that's like part 1 of this trick, is that. And Greenham can explain what that does.
Yeah, so when the bird leaves the screen like that, he's leaving it at a very particular altitude, and that altitude value is what we want to abuse, because it's not just the bird in the game that uses that altitude variable. Some other things also do, such as the fire rod. So by setting that altitude variable and then using the fire rod in a particular way down here in the basement, when it actually connects with something, the AoE damage of that fire rod, the actual area of effect damage that it does around it, is going to actually take place in an entirely different location, offset based on that altitude variable, so that we can actually hit crystal switches that are in an entirely different room. So like if you're hitting something at X coordinate 0, or I'm sorry, Y coordinate 0, the offset is going to set it to like 144 or something like that, so that when it actually connects, you think it's hitting at 0, but the game thinks it's hitting at 144 or whatever. And if there happens to be a crystal switch at 144, then you're going to trigger that switch. So that's kind of how it works. It's definitely not the most accurate explanation, but that was discovered not too long ago, and in Meyer here it saves about 10 seconds on average. Can save up to 12 or so if you're really, really good with it. So very, very cool tech, though. It's definitely the biggest thing that's been found in NMG in a very, very long time.
Yes. What he said.
All right, so Airy rolling into Meyer torches there. He had I think it was a low 107 lighting of that torch there, so we can expect a runner around his level to finish the game in something like anywhere from 20 to 21 minutes, maybe 22. So looking at a sub 130 time, hopefully from Airy here, based on that alone. And then we'll get Gref's torch time here, which is 107.40. So not too terribly far behind. Anything can still happen. The end game here of this run is very, very tough, very unforgiving, and any death in any of these dungeons can definitely shake things up.
Yeah, for sure. Especially that Greffery has lost his fairy drop in Turtle Rock, and things in that dungeon do about 4 hearts of damage, so you have to be pretty careful there. And so he's not going to have that safety of a free heart refill, I guess. So he's got to be extra careful. I mean, they all have to be careful, but he's got to be extra careful. Alright, so we're gonna be coming up soon on part 2 of the Error.
Oh boy. Okay, this is actually really big here. Taking that damage from that Wizrobe, that Wizrobe hits very, very hard, and Aries now down to 3.5 hearts. Now, this is really scary because for the boss fight here, we're going to be intentionally taking damage. So he cannot actually do the optimal strat that we try to do, where we actually damage boost and kill the boss. So he's gonna have to be very careful on the boss fight. But we are seeing this spooky tech in effect right now. You see he shot the fire rod at that spike there, and it actually triggered the crystal switch above it. He's going to do the same thing here. He hits the anti-fairy from the right side there, which actually triggers the switch in the room above, and we don't have to bomb the wall there anymore. He's going to try to farm a heart here, ends up taking a heart of damage, and also loses a little bit of magic. So he is, you know, he had 0 net change there. He's still sitting at 3.5 hearts. So he's going to have to be very careful. He'll probably do at least a few spins on this boss. The goo here that he's going to take the damage from only does 1 heart. So he'll probably try to do 2 spins and then just finish the boss from outside as safely as he possibly can while avoiding these lightning attacks.
Oh, this is
No! We got just a little bit too close to the lightning there. It just clipped him. And Aerie goes down.
Oh, that's so sad.
That is a really rough death. He's going to have to traverse pretty much all the way back through Mire now. So Greff rolling into the Vidi fight now. So he can take the lead with a really good fight. You see he has a very good health count here. So he's going to go for 3 spins and then finish off the rest of the eyeballs with some arrows. Nicely cleaned up. Now just 8 arrows for the main eyeball here, and he is done.
Yeah, it's important to note as well that Aerie cannot do the glitch that he was doing earlier, like the tech he was doing earlier. We call it a spooky glitch, but he can't do that again. So he's gonna actually have to bomb open the wall in the basement in order to. Well, I guess so. And like, isn't there a backup?
You actually don't need to hit the switch when you come through here.
Oh,
again.
right. Oh yeah. No, you will have to hit that switch though, won't he? You have to hit it once at least. The bomb one, because the peg.
Oh, you're right.
bomb,
You do have to hit the bomb wall one. I'm sorry. Yeah, just not the not the first one.
Right. So he's gonna have to bomb open that wall. Yes. We are experts. We run this game. We know what we're doing.
Yeah, it's kind of weird to think about the backup here to dying, because it is a little bit. It has changed, I guess, since this new tech was found. But oh, that was a gold Mire split for Graf. So way to go, dude.
Wow, nice job, Graf. Oh, we have Elmagus fighting. Ooh, Vidi, he poked
no.
an eye.
Yeah, poking.
Ooh.
Obviously, you want to go for spins here, but poking is going to, unless you are holding down A and, to do a poke dash after that, but you will actually drop your sword charge if you poke an eyeball like that. So that's a very, very dangerous thing that can happen in that fight. But Magus lives with 1 heart.
Yeah, that was a nice backup there. Or nice ending to the fight. Got Error back into Vidi. Very nice.
Gets the 0 cycle fight, doesn't even have to deal with any lightning whatsoever, and that's pretty much how it always seems to go. Like the second fight is just so easy. The second, it just you're wondering, like, what did I even do the first time? Like, how did this happen to me?
How could this happen to me? I made a mistake.
I'm not even gonna attempt it. Need the sound effects.
Yeah. All right. So Graf is gonna make his way into Turtle Rock. Just did the peg puzzle, which it's kind of funny because it like trips people up sometimes. Because I know people have been like, oh, like they'll just hit like any of them, and they're like, oh yeah, I forgot. It's actually like you have to hit them in a certain order. Hard puzzle.
Hey, can I catch us up on a couple of donations here?
Please do.
And this time I'm unmuted so people can hear me. I have a $10 donation from Xanadu X1. He put that towards Epistory, I believe. There's no message though. Thank you. And CNE donated $25. Wish you all the best and hope your situation improves. And he put that towards East Origin. I believe it's the Dragon Ball Z attack. And just to give a quick update, coming up next is Quest RPG, basically Quest 64. But there's no incentives for that. After that, though, we have Castlevania Lord of Shadows, which has a New Game Plus versus full power % bid war. Basically, full power % allows you to use cheats, but forces him to do much more dangerous skips to do. And then after that is Final Fantasy GBA. We have Monk and Black Mage and Thief as the top 3 right now, but we have no names for any of the characters.
Thanks. So we've got Greff here in Chomps, and this is probably, I've said this for every dungeon, this is the worst room in the dungeon. But the RNG, yeah, he got bopped. The RNG is a little bit dicey sometimes, and you have to like make a split-second decision about what you're gonna do, basically. So if the Chomps go like in front of the crystal switches like that, then you have to really, you know, figure out what to do really fast before they see you and come at you and hit you. So, and they do 4 hearts of damage if you get hit, so it's quite a lot.
Yeah, very, very scary room, and is probably one of the main reasons that we like having the fairy drop in this dungeon, is in case something does go wrong in that Chomps room, then later on in the dungeon we can potentially get that fairy and get refilled.
Yeah, and also because what you'll see, I guess, from Error is that we take damage intentionally in this roller room that's coming up where there's a key, and that does you also for 4 hearts of damage. So you do take quite a bit of damage in this dungeon from doing things, so having that fairy drop is pretty important.
Yeah, and Greff is at 4.5 hearts here, and you know, as you said, we know that fairy drop is not coming up for him, so he has to be very cognizant of his health going through here. The Pokies do 4 hearts of damage. The rollers, I believe, do 3, so
yeah, lasers do 4.
Does get 2 hearts right there, so that's gonna help him out a little bit. Yeah, sorry to cut you off there, but lasers do 4 hearts as well. And we're gonna be trying a strat towards the end of this dungeon here where we skip past a laser in order to get to a chest with a key in it. So that can be a very scary spot as well. We'll be keeping an eye on that.
Ooh, Greff, unfortunately, see, this game is dumb sometimes. Like, he was facing to the right, and then I think he probably hit Y just at like the time that he was facing up, so the block actually placed to the right, and so when he hit it off, it didn't hit the switch.
Yeah, video game.
Yeah.
I don't know what other explanation you chalk up to that, but it's weird sometimes and doesn't do what you expect it to do.
Yeah.
Okay, so clutch moment here coming up for Greff.
He's gonna do
Oh,
the
okay.
safety.
That's really smart, actually. I don't know if he is. I mean, he's in chat, so I don't know if he's actually watching the stream and seeing where everyone else is at. But maybe he knows that he has this lead right now, and so he's just playing a little bit safe. That's such a good call. Way to go, Greff.
Look at him playing safe,
Yeah.
taking a laser to the face. That's actually not bad though, because now he has more hearts for
True.
the rest of the dungeon, for the boss
True.
fight and everything. So, and like he blasted that door open, so when he died, he just respawned exactly pretty much where he was. So it's a really nice safety for like a, you know, a race like this.
I jinxed him in the best way possible.
Yeah. This is gonna help Greff.
Yeah.
All right, so we're gonna see that coming up from Elmagus here, and then Error shortly after. Didn't know what word I wanted to say there. It's gonna be shortly or soon.
Why not both?
Yeah.
All right. So Greff on the boss fight of the dungeon here, doing the front door strat, staying in front of Trinex's 3 heads here, finishing them each off with the appropriate elemental damage, and then he's going to be finishing the second phase here by doing a spin, which will hopefully hit him twice, so that he only needs one more slash afterwards to finish it off. Very nicely done.
Error took a hit from the laser, so he's only got 4 hearts. I don't think he could take a hit at all from Trinex. If I remember, well, I mean, except for like, I guess the fire, but he's not gonna take a hit from the fire that the firehead shoots out.
Does he do 4? I don't actually remember.
I think if he hits you, he does 4, but maybe he only does 3. I honestly
I want to say 3, but I don't know. These are definitely things we should know.
I know. But then you wonder, like, why would like he do like why would lasers and stuff do like 4 hearts and then Trinex is 3? Like, somebody get hit by Trinex so we can figure this out.
You know, I guess the thing is that the game probably expects you to have like blue mail and bottles and potions and all that good stuff, but we're speedrunners, so we just bypass all of that stuff.
Oh, there we go. Okay, he did 4 hearts of damage.
Yep.
Yeah, okay. Thank you for confirming. Asking
Good thing it wasn't 5.
Yeah. Thank God there's a heart before you enter that fight. Alright, so we've got Greff here. He is opening up Ganon's tower. A fun little thing about Ganon's tower that is a little bit of a time save. It saves about 20 frames. If you open up the dungeon, like not like completely like up against the dungeon, like you just have to be like a pixel off of it, you can save 20 frames. So if you're dashing over there and you like nudge against the tower, just like move down a little bit before you get to the entrance to open it up.
It's free time.
Free 20 frames.
Yeah, and that was a gold T-Rock for Magus.
Yo, nice job.
All right, so Ari, you've got a gold either G Tower or Ganon.
Easy.
He can do it for sure. He can beat this 723 G Tower. I know he can.
Yeah. I think my gold is better than that actually, so he should be able to beat that. I'm way worse at the game than he is.
But G Tower is very, very challenging. It's kind of just the culmination of everything that you've learned throughout the speed run, and you have to, apply all of your items and knowledge in every single screen. So it's a very fun dungeon to watch and see it executed well.
Yeah, for sure. This is definitely one of my favorite dungeons. It's like Greenham said, it's like pretty high execution. You really have to think about every room that you're in. Well, maybe with the exception of this warp maze, but yeah, you really have to think about what you're doing in every room, and it's easy to lose time. There's a segment of Ganon's Tower that we call the Gauntlet, which is just a series of rooms with enemies, and it's pretty difficult. A lot of RNG that you have to react to, but yeah, so that's a place where you can definitely lose a lot of time. But Greff's going to be coming up on Ice Armos, so the first boss that we fought, but on ice.
Yeah, we're going to be using basically the same strat, still using 18 arrows, hoping to get 2 arrows into the very last Armos that we kill, so that we only need 1 more to finish him off, thus completing the fight without the Armos going to its enrage phase, where he gets all of his health back and starts jumping at you. So Greff finished that up nicely. You're going to be grabbing some arrows and then mirroring back to the start to go up the middle and start his ascent up the tower.
Yeah, Greff's going to be coming up on a couple of really tough rooms that we call Mimics 1 and Mimics 2 because we're creative in the Link to the Past community. But these rooms are really difficult. Ooh, see, this is why.
Case in point.
They they each take 2 arrows, and then you also have to work around the spikes and the BMOS and everything, and just a tough room.
Yeah, and if you are moving diagonal at all in pretty much any of these rooms in the tower, since there are so many sprites and things on the screen, there's a ton of lag that gets generated. So dealing with those rooms when they go wrong is extra difficult because of that.
Wonder if Greff is going to go for the fairies.
Based on what we've seen so far from this race and his choices, I would say yes.
Did you say that just because he was bonking over,
Nope.
as you said?
Nope. Nope. The thought was in my head. I was not fast enough to get the words out of my mouth.
Yeah, but that's how you do. You go. I think that Greffery is probably
You're exposing my strats, please.
not going to get. Say it slow enough, and you can be right no matter what. All right. So this is the gauntlet that we talked about earlier. Pretty nice gauntlet 1. Gauntlet 2 is the one I think that people hate the most, but I don't mind it that much. I hate Gauntlet 3 the most, this one. But of course he's gonna get good RNG, so it looks like super easy.
Gee, Emma, you must be so bad at the game.
Yeah, I've been exposed. No, it's just a different art. Like there's bad RNGs in that room that I just cannot.
Yeah, there are so many different patterns, and then dealing with all the other sprites and the ice and everything, the conveyors, blah blah blah.
Blah blah blah. And then we get land mow again, but this time still on sand, but with a shooter in the corner.
Yeah.
But you have the fire rod, so look how
Yeah.
easy that was. A big deal, right?
That shooter though is low-key one of the toughest enemies in the game.
Okay, Elmagus is experiencing all the pain and heartache that is
properly demonstrated.
Yes, thank you, Elmagus,
Yeah.
for proving my point.
This race is actually very close, considering everything that has happened to the various runners here. We've had a few deaths here and there. I think everyone had relatively similar Light World RNG, but that's pretty inconsequential, as we can see.
All right, so Gref is gonna light these torches, and it's this is actually like a hard room to like do quickly, which you think like why you're just lighting 4 torches, but you actually have to follow like a certain pattern and move pretty. Your movement has to be like pretty good in that room in order to light them all quickly and get out the door before one of them goes out. So it looks a lot easier than it actually is to do it.
It's very tough because you're moving in these 1 tile wide spaces, and if you nudge at all around any of these corners, you start slipping, and until you actually get back onto land, you can't really do much about it. So that can slow you down quite a bit. So
yeah, we see Elmagus going for a safer strat here. He picked up some magic. Yeah, so he's got it. He's good.
Gref was playing the bomb mini game there that I like to play. If you get the 8 bomb pack drop in T-Rock, optimally you want to have 0 bombs going into the final fight here. Makes for a little bit faster menu. So Gref was making a little game out of depleting all of his bombs there before he got to the end of the tower, and was having a little fun there in the last room before Moldorm 2.
Yeah. Funnily enough, Moldorm 2 is easier in this dungeon. You have like it's a smaller area, I think, but like there's no middle hole, and you only go down 1. Like if you get knocked down, you only go down 1 floor.
Yeah,
so
it's
like,
not too bad.
not too bad. All right, so we have Gref on Aga 2, which is a pretty difficult fight. You have to be good at geometry. But yeah, this is just a really hard fight to explain, I guess. What you shouldn't be doing.
If you want to know what you shouldn't be doing, just watch my stream anytime.
Yeah, I guess like if there's 2 fake Aghanims and 1 real one, but the 2 fake Aghanims will always shoot out an energy ball, which will do damage, and then the real one will sometimes give out a blue ball, like we got in the first fight. And usually if they're on the line, like you can see with Error right now, you want to spin. But if they're like all over the place, like, you know, you've got them in like a triangle or something, then you don't generally want to spin. I guess it really depends on the situation.
Yeah.
Like everything is just situational. You just have to do this fight for like hours.
Yeah, exactly. That is a really good general approach though. And Eri got some really, really friendly patterns there. I think he opened with a triple, but then only got 1 hit on the second phase and then finished it up in the third. But Gref is now on the final fight of this run, the Ganon fight. Oh, wow.
Eri got a Ganon's Tower gold. So
Nice, you did it, yes! Thank you, Eri.
GG.
All right, so Gref is in a little bit of a sticky situation here. Hook!
Okay.
Hook!
That was scary.
Hook to save your life, man. Okay, so both these guys actually missed the 1-in-1 strat. These first 2 phases of Ganon here, you need eight hits, yes, to actually get onto the next one, or 12.
It's
Taking
12.
one? Hello? How long has it
Hello?
been since I fought Ganon? 12 hits to get to the next phase. So if you can get those 12 hits in before he actually does another one of those phases, then we could just call that one cycle. But unfortunately, I think our 2 runners who are furthest ahead missed that 1-1, so they had to clean up that version of the fight a little bit. But now that is long since over, and they are almost to the end of the fight.
This is actually really close considering everything that's happened to these
I know,
guys.
I'm
Like you
just-
said, yeah, it's pretty crazy. Like if any one of them falls or dies, then like it's over.
Oh,
them.
for sure. Looks like Gref just needs a few more spins here to finish up the fight, and
Or
there
one.
it is, right there, or one. That works for the definition, right?
The new few. A single spin.
So GG to Gref, gonna be rolling in
GG
with
grab.
a 129.27. Very nice run,
GG.
and a Meyer Gold.
And a Meyer Gold, yeah. Can't beat that.
And so Eri on his last spin.
Just a few more.
And he should be rolling in with 129.53, I think, based on when he put his sword up. So another sub 90 run there. Very nice.
Elmagus is very close behind.
Yeah, what a
Probably-
really fantastic race. Wow.
Yeah,
that's
really,
great.
really nice.
GG to Magus as well.
Yeah, GG to all these guys. That was a really good race. Yeah, all within like less than a minute of each other. That's crazy.
And everyone got a gold out of it. So
Yeah.
good stuff.
Good stuff.
All right, well, thank you all so much for watching this Legend of Zelda Link to the Past No Major Glitches race. I had a lot of fun commentating with Emma on it.
Same. It was a lot of fun for sure. Definitely a good race to watch. I mean, if anybody's ever interested in speedrunning Link to the Past, there's a Discord that has a million resources and people to help. So
Yeah.
it's really easy to get a good time in this game. Like our top 100 on the leaderboard right now is all sub 130, which is like a, you know, I guess a big deal in A Link to the Past. It's kind of like the first like big, what do you call it? Like milestone.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's about it.
And thanks to High Spirits and everyone putting on this marathon. It's always so amazing to see people in the community come together like this to help someone out. So thank you all so much for your views, your donations, and your support. Much appreciated.
Yeah, thanks everyone. It's definitely very heartwarming to see something like this help someone out in need. So thanks all, and keep it going because, you know, it's only just begun.
Yeah, I'd say this just began, you guys. We're only 2 games in, and we're already at $600. So what can I say? Well, what I could do is I could put a little music on the background for a second. Okay, so yeah, so thank you all. Thank you, ErirorPS, Elmagus.